listen, I'm dreaming of having sex with you. You don't have to argue. You shouldn't torture people. The fate realized itself through knowing it and avoiding it. I don't believe in going deep into your inner self. You should always ask yourself what other options failed so that this could have happened. Freedom has to be grounded in a complex set of unwritten rules. I don't make a compromise here. I want this passionate love. Now, the paradox which applies to us today, I think, unfortunately, is that what if we are dealing with a fate, destiny or determinism, which realizes itself only through being known? I'm a pessimist. I think this is happening today in a perverted way. We hear all the time about, global warming, threat, and it's all a perverted game that the more we know about it, the more we are entering it. You know which story and that's the end, I have in my mind. You know that wonderful old story about appointment in Samara? You find it in Somerset Maugham, some other writers. It's a wonderful story. A servant on an errand in the busy market in Baghdad meets death. He is terrified by death's gaze and runs to his master and says, "Give me a horse, I will ride day and night to reach Samara in the north of Iraq where death will not find me." The good master provides to servant a horse and goes himself to the market, finds death and shouts at death, "How could you do this to my faithful servant?" You know what the death answers? You must know. "No, my gaze was not a threat. My gaze was a look at surprise. What is the guy doing here when tomorrow I have an appointment with him in Samara?" But don't you know that it's the same with Oedipus' story, our founding myth? Oedipus, you remember, Oedipus realized itself only through prediction. What would have been the wise things of Oedipus' parents where they were told, your son will screw you, mother, and before that kill you? It will say, fuck off, we don't take it seriously, and everything would have been happy. The fate realized itself through knowing it and avoiding it. That's our predicament today. It's a very tragic one, that knowing it not only doesn't help, but precisely through knowing what awaits us and the wrong way to react to it, we fall even more deeply into it. Certain things are accepted in a good sense, dogmatically. Like, I would like to live in a society like this, where you don't have to argue. You shouldn't torture people, women shouldn't be raped. If you need to argue for it, you are already losing something. This is why what horrified me is that although, who did this? Dick Cheney or who, and then Trump. You remember how some 10, 15 years ago when all of a sudden torture became a topic of debate. Maybe if we do it in the soft way, blah, blah, blah. And even if the majority was opposed to it, this was even more horrible. It became a topic of debate. Not to mention rape, who was, I always forget his name, he's not my best friend, some American senator who claimed there is no rape. The moment we debate for it, we are lost. The last thing, when we talk about objective research, I still think that here, this is philosophical problematic, maybe to you and to you. What horrifies me most is examples when factual truth about just what is really out there serves as clearly an instrument of something we don't agree with, like racism and so on. Like an example, if I were to be a pro-neo-Nazi German, I guarantee you that I could write a book full of facts, only facts, where I say, wait a minute, it's not so simple. Look at the statistic, 60% of journalists in early 30s were Jews, and so on and so on. So the true question here, when we fight anti-Semitism, is not the question of objectivity. Are facts really like that, the way anti-Semite describes them? My point is, the moment you accept this as a topic of a debate, you sold your soul to the devil. Because the question is not, are Jews or Palestinians today, whoever, are really like that. The true question is, why do the Nazis need the image of the Jew, the anti-Semitic image of the Jew, to sustain their world view? So there is that's for me the tragedy. The most dangerous propaganda for something which is obviously ethically reprehensible is the propaganda which, at the level of facts, can be mostly truthful.
But we effectively are in an era of cynicism as a form of ideology. It not only doesn't matter if you take your official ideology seriously or not. That's the beautiful paradox that I learned from my communist past, I mean, living in communist Yugoslavia. It was a beautiful paradox. You know, we had an official ideology, self-management, socialism, and so on and so on. But if you took the official ideology too seriously, you were in danger of being treated as a dissident. And you were perceived as a danger to those in power. So an ideology functioned in such a way that you were expected not to take it seriously. It wasn't only that it didn't matter if you take it seriously. You had to not take it seriously. It's a beautiful example. And this is how it is today with Trump and so on, all of them. And this is, again, the most dangerous moment when ideology appears as just neutral common sense, you know, like forget big ideologies, go to actual problems and so on. Oh, ideology begins here. What do we perceive as an actual problem? Ideology is already in the definition of problems. That's why, for me, the first task in critique of ideology is not to claim, okay, we have problems, we must approach them in this or that way, but is this really a problem? An example of this ideology. Did you notice how in the last decade or two, racism, sexism, especially racism, are usually formulated in the terms of tolerance? You know, we should tolerate, but this is for me already an ideological move, a proof. Go, I did it. Through the speeches, text, whatever he wrote of Martin Luther King. He never uses practically the word tolerance. His complaint is not whites don't tolerate us, we should tolerate each other more. No, his point is different legal systems, social rights, economic justice, and so on and so on. The whole notion of tolerance as a main problem changes the entire field so that it becomes a cultural problem. You know, this is what those in power like. Even a false form of psychoanalysis enters here. Like, if I'm intolerant towards you, then this means I have psychic problems, I should analyze myself, what is wrong, and so on and so on. No wonder that you remember when Mel Gibson made an anti-Semitic outburst, you know what was his excuse? I will search the help of a psychiatrist to... No, sorry, anti-Semitism is not a psychic problem. It's a material social force. It involves a certain way to deal with Jews and with others and so on and so on. So again, here I follow Louis Althusser. only at this point that never forget that ideology is a material force, in the sense that even if it's factually wrong, like anti-Semitism or anti-Palestinian racism and so on, the point is not are they right or wrong. Of course they are wrong. But the point is how they structure our political social reality, how they are enacted. And that's really difficult to change.
Evil, we humans are masters in justifying horrible acts by constructing a narrative which makes them acceptable. Stalinists were masters indeed, and others. Here I would like to return to Hannah Arendt, whom you, in a crucial text, early one I think, she draws a wonderful difference between SA, the early Nazi thugs, and SS. She said SA, those who were purged in 1934, were vulgar, brutal evil, raping, beating, and so on. With SS, you get something much more horrifying. You get this cold, impersonal, bureaucratic evil. They don't have this type of passions and so on and so on. In this sense, I claim that I would nonetheless be ready to talk with all reservations about, just 2 points to finish, about first, social forms of evil. Let me take an extreme example. It's really depressing, even if you check it just on Wikipedia. The Opium War, 1842-4, against China. I'm very close to say this was evil, because you cannot imagine what it did to China. 1820, China had a functioning system against hunger and drought. Its economy was not per capita, but absolutely 3 times stronger than British and so on. Then they did it on behalf of the notion of good and civilization. They prohibited import of opium, and the Western justification was free trade is the condition of civilization. It's our duty, not only right, to invade China, to force it to be civilized. When I'm in Mexico or in the United States, I said, why don't you do this? And Mexican and Colombia cartels declare war on United States because they are prohibiting. But you see what I'm saying? You cannot simply say they were bad. This was the dark side of the liberal market system itself then. Don't talk about liberal capital, and you have here across the sea even almost the worst problem. You know that Ireland, the potato famine, you know that Ireland was all that time even exporting wheat and so on. They believed that to mix immediately. Okay, so you got my point. That's the last point, very last. You know, when we are talking about ignoring evil and so on, aren't we today approaching something much more horrifying? We learned how to describe correctly things, but in a way that doesn't engage us. Like my example, it was disgusting. I would plant a bomb there if able. Remember 2 years ago or the Glasgow Conference on Global Warming. It was all very ethical, even basically correct insights. But the very form precluded us to do something. So that's, sorry, just one sentence, literally, with a couple of commas and so on. That is for me the problem. Give me the last example, already mentioned it. I hate all those big biennales, Venice Castle. Their justification is pure anti-capitalism. We are all exploited by capital, colonialists, blah, blah. And they declare this, and nonetheless, these biennales work in a perfect way as part of capitalist. So, you know, the tragedy today is you can say the truth, but it doesn't awaken us. There is, for me, a strange psychological fact that often you cannot say something in reality, but if it's put in the terms of a game, even theater play, you can do it. For example, the great classic, Jane Austen's Mansfield Park. A young couple is in love, they are too constrained to say this openly. But they select a Shakespeare piece, I think, where they, in the game, but they can say it. So this is what Jacques Lacan meant, I think, when he says that the truth has the structure of a fiction. And I deeply believe that, in this sense, masks are never just masks. When we adopt a mask to play a game, we can bring out there something that we are not ready to confront in our so-called real life. In this sense also, let me give you another example. I'm ashamed to mention it. It's so stupid, but you saw 4 Weddings and the Funeral, that moment when Hugh Grant declares love. You see, he does it in the sense of, he's stuttering, repeating himself, but precisely through this apparent breakdown of the game, he gets his message through. Sometimes the failed game is the only way to get the message through. That's why, incidentally, I hate male chauvinists who, when a woman reports to be raped, they say, but you see, she contradicted herself and so on. Sorry, but I would be very distrustful if a woman were to give totally perfect cold report on. Okay, I wouldn't discard it, but you know what I think? Sometimes the truth can only articulate it through failures and so on and so on. So the last thing I want to emphasize this. I don't believe in going deep into your inner self. Sorry to be brutal, if you go deep into it, you find deep shit there, I claim. Monstrous fantasies and so on. I believe that the only way to overcome yourself is to identify with your mask. Just to conclude, that I don't drag on, my favorite movie here, Rossellini, you should see it, you can get it on YouTube, from 1960, I think, with Vittorio General della Rovere. De Sica plays a poor guy who is caught, it's still occupied Italy, caught by the Nazis, and since he looks exactly like General della Rovere, a big name of resistance, they tell him, we killed Della Rovere, but resistance that we have in prison don't know this. So go there, pretend that you are General Della Rovere, and people will confide in you, and you will tell us that. You can guess what is the ending. He identifies so much to his role that he is ready to die. He doesn't say anything, and he is shot publicly as General Della Rovere. In this sense, I am for good alienation. Who cares about his real self, a poor beggar, and so on? In this complete identification with another, you can find freedom, but also horror. Did you see with Jim Carrey, his best film, I think, did you see The Mask? Where he is completely free, but nightmare comes out. This complete freedom to do what you want, he experiences it as a nightmare. So in this more precise sense, I think that that first there is something liberating in games and cliches. Can you imagine how horrible life would have been if you were to tell just the truth sincerely, without hypocrisy? There is no life without hypocrisy. Here I would warn also against, I wonder if you would agree, another extremism of so-called deep ecology. Let's avoid misunderstanding. Not in this cheap sense, they go too far, we cannot abandon everything and so on, but I found hidden in their line of argumentation an extreme anthropocentrism, where, you know how they argue? They argue like this. Not only humans have rights. We live on Earth. We are just one among the species.
Who said this, sorry?
So-called deep ecologists.
Deep ecologists, okay, sorry, yes.
No, the idea is this one, that we have to learn modesty. We have to learn that we are just one among the living species. So we have to take care also of the well-being, right? They get here ambiguous, of all other parts of nature, not only animals, not only plants, but even they speak about the rights of rivers, of beautiful mountains, and so on and so on. But now, back to what Yuval said, and I agree with him, but animals at least make sounds which signal their suffering, but rivers, mountains, whatever, they don't know they have rights because in some sense they don't know anything. So what deep ecology means is that beneath this false modesty, we are just among the species, that we are really the universal beings, the one who should be responsible for everything. Here it's hidden another potential of how we humans should really control the earth. And then you get to all those plans which are often masked as progressively ecological, like to put more carbon monoxide in the air to prevent. But I would agree with Yuval, nature is so unpredictable here. We never know what can the secondary non-intended consequences be. So yes, we should be radical ecologists, but always be aware of this, that the long-term consequences can run against. That's why, immediately I give him the word, that's why I am a Hegelian today. I think the formula today should be back from Marx to Hegel. Marx still had a plan. If we do this, there will be at least a substantially better society. Hegel is not doing this. You know what Hegel says in his most quoted, but people don't take it seriously, Introduction to Rechtsphilosophie, to philosophy of right. He said, thought, philosophy, can only grasp the present order when it begins to disintegrate. And future, we cannot say anything. We have to be extremely careful about the future. What this practically means is not pacifism, let's do whatever we want, we don't know what will happen. No, it's just that, you know where is Hegel at his best? In the spirit of what Yuval said. When he takes an extreme idea and demonstrates how unexpectedly in actuality it turns into its opposite. For Hegel, the classical example, I think even he exaggerates there, but French Revolution, freedom, you get terror. The second half of 19th century, it was in Europe, not elsewhere. Relative period of half a century of calm, progress, women's rights, you get World War I. Soviet Union, October Revolution, whatever you think, an attempt at emancipation, you get Stalinism. The last example, Fukuyama, happy 90s, end of history, and so on, we are now where we are. So my basic approach would be aware that, as a rule, when you are making big plans, things will always, in some sense, go wrong. And try to take this into account. Do we really want what we think that we want? Quite often, what appears as an obstacle to getting what we want is really what sustains our desire. For example, I read years ago, I remember this, a biography of T.S. Eliot. You know, while his wife was It's not clear. Did he put her there? Was it really in a psychiatric hospital? He had a distant affair, it's only letters, it seems, with another lady. And all the letters were, oh, let's just wait for the moment when my wife will die, then we will be able to be together. You know what happened? When the wife died, they split also. And I think this is a general structure of our desire. Did you see maybe the François Truffaut film? It's old, you are too young to see it. Day for Night, La Nuit Américaine. There is a wonderful marginal scene there that I love. A guy, one of the cast, wants to seduce another script girl, whatever, I don't know. So their car breaks down. They go to a lake close to the road. And then the guy tells her, listen, I'm dreaming of having sex with you for days, all the time here. Now we are alone. Nobody knows that we are here. Why don't we quickly do it? You know what the woman does? She said, okay, why not? And started to pull his trousers down, her trousers down. And he is totally shocked. What do you mean? Like, just like that or whatever, and so on. So I think that this logic of detour and so on is part of our sexual games. You cannot go directly for it. It's very difficult. That's why Lacan characterizes the ethical position in psychoanalysis as do not betray your desire. Usually we do betray it. For example, it happened to me, a dirty detail, not problematic, don't be afraid. When I was young, I was in love with a girl. The link was that the girl had a father who was a philosopher, and the ritual was to arrive at her apartment, first to have a talk with her father, and then let's go out to her. But at a certain point she dropped me, because she said, I got it. What you really want is the surplus enjoyment. It was the other way around from what it looked. It was not, father is just the detour. She told me, I was a detour for you. What you really enjoy is this. Let's call it intellectual foreplay, talking with her father. Or he has a wonderful, Darian Leader, your great Lacanian, who also writes good books, has a wonderful example in one of his early books, where he mentions a case that allegedly happened to him. A patient came to him and said, yesterday I invited the lady out, and I wanted to, of course, we went to a hotel with a good restaurant. The idea was, we have a nice meal, and then I take her up to a room. But he said he made a terrifying slip of tongue. When entering the restaurant, he said to the waiter, a bed for two, please, instead of a table for two. And Darian Leader does something wonderful. He said how to read this slip of tongue. It's not as you would have thought he was already thinking about sex later. It's quite the opposite. He was afraid that he will enjoy eating there too much and he will lose the will to even go upstairs later. So it was a reminder to himself, don't enjoy this too much, you know. So again, what I am saying here is that the lesson of all these reversals and so on is a very simple one. It's that we enjoy, there is no enjoyment in directly attaining the goal. It's like falling in love. Again, I'm sorry. You walk on a street, sorry for the tasteless example, but not vulgar. You sleep on a banana peel. A lady helps you to get up. Maybe you discover it's the love of your life. So although you know well it was a pure contingency, but the way you experience it, your life, if you're a romantic like I am, you are waiting for that moment. We have to live with this contradiction.
So philosophy is like falling in love?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think philosophy is falling in love in the sense that it's, you know what, Harari, I would have many things to debate with him, but there I sincerely agreed with him, where he said freedom is never a conclusive state. Now I am free. Freedom is the very eternal doubt, am I free or not, and so on. And I think it's the same with love. The moment you don't doubt your love, the moment you think you know why you are in love, it's finished. So they both have this retroactivity. And what I find it so sad today, I hate it. My friend Alain Badiou pointed this out. In English and in French and in some other languages, not in all, the verb, a very correct one, which uses to fall in love. And one should give to the verb fall all this radicality. You go, all of a sudden, boom, you fall. What I hate so much, I don't believe it, I'm here old metaphysician, with this idea, but I have different needs, maybe polyamory works, you are good for this, you are good for that. No, sorry, this is not love. This is your different needs and so on. Love is something else. It's much more non-conditional. And what I fear is that, you know, when I was young, there was a more conservative erotic pedagogy. To have multiple partners was considered pathological. Even psychoanalysts were usually why are you running, if you're a man, sorry for the male chauvinist, and heterosexual, why are you running from one woman to another? What are you escaping from, your mother or what? Now in Argentina, maybe the most psychoanalyzed country in the world, when I was there, they told me, and I find this sad decadence, that it's the opposite. If you jump from one woman to the other, for women also, if you change partners, it's considered normal. If you are faithful to your partner, they say, oh my God, this is pathological fixation, we have to analyze it, and so on. I think beneath this is not just liberation, no, it's a sad redefinition of love in the term of your needs. Maybe you need more this, more of that, and then maybe only different people can do it. This is not love. I don't make a compromise here. I want this passionate love, but not, you know where I'm not romanticist. I understand Orpheus and Eurydice. You may don't know it, but the German cultural critique, he is now old, 30 years ago, Klaus Teweleit, provided a wonderful interpretation of why does bringing her up from underworld, why does Orpheus look back? It's not that because he was worried, Eurydice made some sounds, he was worried. The idea is that while she was following him and he was prohibited to look at her back, when she was following him up by divine grace, he started to ask serious questions like, okay, she's my ideal, but wait a minute, to live with this woman who will wash the dishes, all that stuff, what if I get disappointed? Isn't it better to get rid of her? And I retain her as an ideal, I write poems, but I can do what I want with other women. So she looked back, bye-bye, I will celebrate you all my life, but I will be rid of you. That's not true love. True love is that, true love, Lacan says this somewhere, doesn't idealize the partner. True love is not idealization. You expect all the small imperfections, and you love the person even more because of this.
Yes, of course, I agree that. And this is for me the great tragedy of the 20th century, that not only the fascist right, but the radical left also, when it came to power, enacted new forms, even of terror, of unfreedom, and so on and so on. And I consider totally legitimate the question of how this was possible. I don't buy these stories. Everything was okay in the Soviet Union. Then, unfortunately, Stalin took over and everything went wrong. But so in what sense I do remain a leftist who advocates freedom? My basic point, and even some conservatives, my God, would agree, I hope, with me, is that freedom has to have a material base. I don't mean this vulgar Marxist way of this, but simply, okay, you are free, but to exercise that freedom, you always, that's the paradox of freedom, have to obey certain rules. The most metaphilic example, we are free in our thoughts, but to freely think, articulate what we want, we have to perfectly master the rules of language. I don't want to live in a situation where I have to learn or invent the rules again and again. Obeying the rules of language is the basis of freedom. To think. Then also, of course, we have to extend this on the social level. In order for us to feel or enact freely, there are so many things at the level of what German calls sitten, customs. Like you walk along the street, you should be relatively sure that others will also obey the same rules of politeness and so on and so on. Then I can move further, of course, to the social economic domain, how state agencies function and so on and so on. And here I agree with the point made by the last speaker that we shouldn't get too focused on what I would have called the explicit ideological stances, freedom and so on and so on. Look at the material practice. The examples mentioned of actual unfreedom are for me precisely examples of, and this is for me crucial in debates today, what Hegel called sitten, mores, customs, which are not just explicit rules, but the implicit rules which tell us how to act in a certain situation. We can have formal freedom, but you in the UK have MI6, other mechanisms which de facto underprivilege or exclude other people. This is what, for me, the reality of ideology, of ideological exclusions, and so on and so on. Freedom has to be grounded in a complex set of unwritten rules which are acceptable.
Look, the first thing about video games is that their universe is incomplete. You're in a game, stupid game, where you are shooting, fighting on the main street of a small town, let us say, and in the back you see forest with trees. But it's not part of the game that you can approach those trees and see them in detail. It's part of the game that you cannot go there, so the programmers say, why lose time on that programming? Let's leave it open. And the way, I got this from a popular introduction to philosophy, sorry, forgot the name, but very intelligently, I think, written. The guy says, is not quantum physics, does it not have the same lesson? When God was programming the universe, he said, people are too stupid to reach beyond the atom. So why should I bother their programming? He left it undetermined. And we were a little bit too bright for God, and we, as you say in English, caught God with his pants down, as it were. You know.
And in fact, do you then believe then, or are you positing in terms of that argument? So are you saying, or maybe it's not possible, within quantum physics, this question, is reality discrete or continuous? So is reality like Minecraft, where you kind of zoom in further and further and further, and then you get, as you say, down further to these tiny little, to the leptons, and further down? Is that a view
No,
that
I spontaneously, but I don't have any empirical ground for this. I'm for discrete nature in what sense? And I think this is almost maybe the lesson of quantum physics, but I'm very much speculating now. I think that it's not this endless divisibility. You can further split that. At a certain point, you can come to I can split this in half, this and that, this and that. But I believe when you approach the 0 point, the division is between something and nothing. You see, you get something, its counterpoint is void, is nothing. And so I'm not saying this is bad metaphysical reading of that in this freedom is grounded. No, first, freedom is not contingency. No, it's not my free act but even this is not, of course, it's deterministic, but let's say for me it's a contingency. If to make a decision, I throw a coin up and set head, tail, or whatever. No, that's contingency from my view, really it's not. But freedom is a necessity of its own. Freedom is a positive decision that you do. Is this only, as they say, user's illusion? I think not. I think we have to, it's more important than ever, we have to accept this ontological openness of nature already, of history. For example, we are now in an open situation, and retroactively it will become necessary. If there will be a world war, there will be people who will survive it, they will tell the story of how it was all pointed towards this war, we were doomed. If there will not be a war, they will say it was like Cold War, false alarms, and so on. What I'm claiming is that these are not simply illusions. The situation is genuinely open. And another lesson, which I know it's not legitimate, I apply it too quickly from quantum physics to humanities, nonetheless, is that to understand something, a historical event, you should read it as in a superposition with other possible events. When something happens, you should always ask yourself what other options failed so that this could have happened.
First, as you, Rupert, nicely deployed, yes, I would go even a step further. The usual idea of materialism is small, somewhere in empty space, there are just small bits of matter, and they somehow chaotically mix, and everything comes out of that. My type of materialism would have been, I called it that, materialism without matter. I take the lesson of, as far as I'm able to understand them, of quantum physics and so on, and I claim we should not get fixed on a certain figure of matter, this mechanistic idea, like little billiard balls, whatever, encountering each other. Reality can be totally abstract. It can be immaterial waves, whatever we call it. What makes it atheist for me, and this is the crucial point, is that it's not run by an overreaching intelligence or whatever, that it's basically blind. A blind process, not mechanist. It's a blind process, but for me, so-called reality, we can debate what it is, as I often develop, open, ontologically non-constituted. That's why I totally oppose those readings of quantum physics which see a kind of hidden idealism in it, the role of observation, this means that reality is somehow constituted through our gaze. No, Niels Bohr, read him, was to the end not a religious guy. But again, this idea of, I think, changes enough. This idea of reality as ontologically incompleted, with gaps even in itself, incomplete universe. And at the same time, very important, the growing, exploding gap between what science presents us as reality and our ordinary everyday experience of reality. Look at classic Greek thought, Aristotle. He basically constructs an ontology out of our ordinary daily experience of reality. Heavy objects fall down, up, the sky, and so on. But already with Galileo, this image becomes counterintuitive, then Einstein, then quantum physics. Yes, it is. I will wrap up. So that's the first thing. So this is the problem that I have even with some people like Hawking, whose thesis is that the time of philosophy is over. Science is now replacing it. Not only religion, but even philosophy. Science is taking it over. It's true. It's very interesting observation that in the last decades we were trained to even look for the solution of one's metaphysical question in science. If you are today interested, is our world finite or infinite? We look into quantum cosmology, not to metaphysics. If you want to know we have a free will or not, you ask cognitive scientists and so on and so on. But I think, okay, I will explain it later to wrap up. I think that there is a dimension of reflexive thinking which remains a domain of philosophy. I'm more a philosopher here, and which for structural reasons cannot be covered up by science. And point two, on this I would especially like to insist, we should be very careful about what do we mean by belief. Today we have not only beliefs which we publicly profess but secretly don't take seriously, we also have things that we publicly mock but we act as if we believe in them. To conclude, one line, literally, don't be mad at me, with my favorite, you must know it, most of you, joke idea attributed to Niels Bohr. You know, a friend of him saw at the entrance to his house a horseshoe, superstitious item preventing evil spirits to enter house. And the friend asked him, okay, but you are an atheist scientist, why do you have that about the entrance to your house? Bohr answered, I know, I don't believe in it, I'm a scientist, but I was told it works even if you don't believe in it. That's our attitude.